Right. Hello, Zara. Bonjour. Um,
Bonjour.
Thank you very much for accepting to be with me today. So, what I'd like to start with is a fun fact that makes me stare in the mirror and see even more grey hair than there is. But we had a chat this week, didn't we, to um, talk about the today's interview, and realized together that you will soon be the age that I was when I started teaching you French. That is a beautiful and scary story all at once for me. But I think it is really, really quite wonderful. I hadn't realized until we spoke this week. I remember that you came to the academy when you were about 4 years old, but it hadn't quite hit me that hard that I was your age. So thank you so much for accepting to be here today. As I just said, you came along and started one of our French bilingual programs when you were only about 4. You're now nearly 24. And you stayed with us for quite a number of years until I think you were about 11 or 12. And then you had quite a long break because you were just doing French at school. And you came to us a little bit so we could help you with your exams. And then you went off to university. And I think you're going to tell us quite a bit about that in a while. But my question to you today is quite a general question, but what does French mean to you today, having been introduced to the French language at a very young age, to then experienced it in a kind of more standard environment like the school system, and to then study with French, and you'll talk about that a little while later. What does French mean to you today?
I mean, it's a broad question, but I think the thing that comes to mind is opportunity. French means opportunity to me. Being able to speak French has opened so many doors throughout my life, from school all the way through to my career today. And yeah, I mean, not just opportunities in French language, it meant I was able to speak other languages. I picked up Spanish really easily. It meant I was able to go and live in France for a year, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit more detail. It meant I was able to take on jobs where I was speaking French or dealing with French clients. So yeah, it's just completely opened up a new world for me. It's created friendships in France, things that I would just never experience if I didn't speak the language. So I think, yeah, opportunity.
Wonderful. That's music to my ears, and that really warms my heart because learning to speak a foreign language is so much more than just acquiring a new skill. There's so much to it. My next question would be about the people that you've met along that journey who, like you, have had the experience of learning French. When you learn French at school for quite a number of years, because I think you did it up to in England what we call A level, which is about the age of 17 and 18, when you just before you leave school, before university. So if you start to do it the minute you go to high school or secondary school, you actually study it for 7 years. So that's quite a long period of time. Then you've used it for work, as you've just mentioned. My question to you, and I gather it's not that easy to answer, but have you found that there was a difference between your experience of the language, your knowledge, or your confidence in speaking it, compared to people who may have had an excellent knowledge such as yours by the time they left school, but who had only started learning it in the school system, which here in the UK is only from the age of 11. Did you notice anything different?
Yeah, I think I noticed a lot of differences from an early age. So from kind of 11, when I started secondary school, I was studying alongside my peers. I was just undoubtedly quite far ahead in my studies. I understood the language to a very high level already. I was probably ready to take my exams probably 3 or 4 years in advance of everyone else. I mean, but maybe that's a bit overconfident, but honestly, I was so far ahead of my peers. And people always ask me, like, how did you get so good at French? And I always mentioned you because, I mean, I just wouldn't have even learned how to learn the language. I think that's the key. It's not just the language itself that you learn, but how to learn a language. And I think you can pick that up so much easier at a young age, even the accent, the techniques for picking things up, all of that I'd learned from a young age. And it meant that when I went to school, I was so well equipped to start, and I could just learn things so quickly. And it meant I could pick up Spanish, like I mentioned. And people always used to ask me, like, how do you study at home? What do you do? And I was like, oh, I'm just watching TV in French, or I'm listening to the radio in French. Is that not what everyone's doing? And they were like, no, like, we didn't realize. So all of these things were just completely normal to me by that age. And it meant that I was able to kind of make so much progress during school. And I went and did a French exchange, and everyone commented on my accent, how much more French my accent was than other people, how much easier I was able to communicate with other people. I was kind of acting as the translator for my friends a lot of the time. And yeah, it gave me so much more confidence as well once you've spoken to French people, because I hadn't really spoken to anyone French apart from you until I was probably 14. So I didn't really get a chance to properly try it. And then I went to France for a week, did a French exchange, spoke French, and it gave me so much confidence, realizing that everything I'd been studying was suddenly coming to life, and it actually had a meaning. And I ended up making some very long-term friendships just from that 1 week. People that I still go back and see today, and they come and see me. And yeah, and when I went to university as well, I was at Oxford University, so I was surrounded by some very, very clever people. But that was still quite a clear difference between people that had studied from a school age and myself. I was learning much more casual words. I was able to speak in a much more colloquial or kind of natural way, whereas other people were sort of speaking in quite a formal manner, quite an over professional manner, which is obviously really, really good as well. But it meant when we went to then move to France for a year studying French, I was the one that was able to kind of build connections with people outside of our sort of school group or our university group, and I was the one that was able to join clubs in the area and really kind of become part of the culture. And yeah, I honestly, I felt so glad that I'd studied it for such a long time. It's quite weird to think it's been 20 years now. So yeah, it just feels so normal. It's like a part of my life now that I speak French, and it's something I'm so proud of, and it's honestly opened so many doors, like I said.
That's really, it's really wonderful to hear all of that. And I just want to go back on something that you said about starting to learn the language in your teenage years in a more kind of standard classic approach to learning the language, like at school, and the advantage that it gives children when they start at a very early age. And that's often why what I talk to parents about is that, when you start and you're still a baby as you were, because you were only 4, we are not going to make you fluent in a couple of years. But the work that we do is to prepare you to become bilingual. And this wonderful environment that we can immerse the children in, and how we can equip them with an understanding that there are other languages out there, make them play with the language. So later on, when we present the rules of the language to them, when they have to learn it in a slightly more formal way, so it's more accurate, it just makes sense. I very often talk about an instance when I was in the classroom and I started to speak in the past, passé composé for those who speak French, and the children in the classroom are only about 9 or 10. It's called our Leadership High program when they reach that stage, which you did. And I found myself speaking in the past, which I wanted to teach them, but I realized that I'd started speaking in French. And I stopped myself and said, sorry, children, I wanted to say, and one little kid looked at me and went, that's all right, we understood. And I just thought, oh, because I was speaking in the past. And they said, well, we've heard you speak like that before. And then I showed them and explained to them. We did a little game, because they're still very young. We did a little game on how to use, the passé composé, and how there's like two little bits to how you conjugate the verb. And they picked it up instantly. And I knew they were bright, and I knew they'd been with us for years, and I knew they loved their French lessons. But nevertheless, I was still astonished that they could understand it so well and so quickly. And then another one said, but we've heard you say these words so much that actually we didn't know it worked like that, but it really just makes sense. And that's the beauty of introducing children to a foreign language at a young age. You just break down barriers. There's no inhibition. It becomes normal in their world to be surrounded by a different language. And by introducing them to lots of different, you can still introduce them to a lot of structure and rules of the language, but through play, then when actually things get a little serious, everything falls into place and it just makes sense. So I'm really, really pleased that it clearly worked very well for you. I just wanted to talk about your mum and dad briefly. So I remember that, your mum's Scottish and your dad's English, and you guys were born and brought up in the south of England. So there was nothing on the cards for you to say that you or your sister would be brought up bilingually. And your sister's the same as you, she's a little bit younger than you, but she came to the academy a few years later and followed the early years bilingual program, similar to you. Do you know, I mean, have you ever asked your mum and dad, do you know why they decided to enroll you in one of our programs?
It's a really good question. I've not spoken to them recently about it, but I do know my mum, neither of my parents speak another language, but my mum does come from an Italian family, and she was in a household where people were speaking Italian and she didn't understand a word of it. She never learnt the language. No one had taken the time to kind of expose her to it on a daily basis or really teach her it. So she felt a sense of understanding that without understanding a language, you can't really be part of a culture, you can't be part of a conversation, you can't really understand even your background or what's going on in another country or another family. You can't understand in the same way that you would if they were speaking English to you. So I think that maybe there was a sense of want for me and my sister to experience some of that in any language, really. I don't think there was a particular reason why we chose French or they chose French, and just really get that exposure and see where it would take us. So yeah, we were very lucky that our parents were able to give us that opportunity. And as I said, we've gained that understanding of culture, that understanding of people, and that exposure that maybe my mum never got, my parents never got. They may never know exactly what it means for me to have been able to live in France for a year and have been able to speak with French people in French and understand what's going on and get a bank account, all these things that is like such obvious stuff that everyone's doing every day in their normal life. Doing them in another country and actually being part of that country and getting involved in what's going on, it's almost impossible if you don't speak the language well. So yeah, I think they just hoped that it would give us some kind of opportunity, some kind of advantage, and we would make what we can of it. And I think both me and my sister have done that, which is I'm really glad that we have.
This made me think of another question. I think that for a lot of parents, it could just be, I think this is a wonderful asset for my child's future. I think that it can, really broaden their horizons. Or I just think that it would be a nice thing to do outside of all that they learn at school. It could just be as simple as that. What happens then is they come to the academy and is seeing, okay, are they going to like it? Is it sustainable? Can they really have language lessons for a number of years? Are they going to be excited about going to the academy? Now, of course, things have evolved now. We still have the academy here in the Newbury Town Centre, but a lot and most of our educational programs for children are actually now delivered online. And so, I hear that from a lot of mum and dads, I need to make sure, is my child really going to be happy to be there every week? And what we have found is that generally when children come to us, when they're 4, 5, 6, they're still with us when they are 12, 13 or 14. Do you remember why? That could be a tricky question because it was a long time ago, you were a little girl, but do you remember anything that made you want to go to lessons, or why you've never questioned, because you were a really regular student. You, when we reconnected a few months ago, you said to me, but obviously I remember you because you were my only French teacher, but do you remember me because you had like 600 odd students? And I definitely remembered you because you were one of the first ones, but also you were extremely regular. You were very studious. You jumped in when you arrived in the class. So you clearly, made an impact on my career as well. But do you remember what kept you going for so long? What excited you about going to your French class every week?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I was pretty hyperactive as a child. I don't know if you remember. So I was always like jumping around, trying new things. And I remember that you just really matched that energy, and I was able to kind of have a really fun hour or so with you. I can't remember how long the lessons used to be, probably an hour. And we were able to just learn, but it didn't really feel like school or learning in that way. It was just games and fun. And I mentioned one of my favorite lessons was when we'd come in and you'd do like a pretend sweet shop, and we'd have to like ask in French for what we wanted, and then you'd kind of pretend to sell us some sweets. And I just used to love that lesson so much and look forward to it so much. So yeah, it never felt like school or like extra lessons or anything. It always just felt like sort of fun, and I never really realized how much I'd learned until I look back now and I realized how far ahead I was, and how natural it came to me when I started actually speaking French in France. So yeah, as a grown up. I'm an adult now.
It really is lovely to hear that, because another thing that we really try and work hard at is to ensure that the children have a great time. They need to feel energized when they come in the class, but they also need to feel super enthusiastic about it when they leave the class, so they want to come back. Our motto is very much that learning a foreign language for young children shouldn't just be a school subject, but part of their lifestyle. That's really what we are trying to instill in them. That's why we run sessions throughout the year. If you miss one, you can catch up on another. It's okay. We're always here, because it needs to become a routine. That routine becomes a lifestyle, and then children don't even think about it twice. They go to school, they go and visit families. Sometimes they have sleepover with friends, and you know what? Part of this little lovely little routine, they also have French, and they build a community. They learn with other children who may not be at school with them, and we create this kind of community of little linguists, and it just works, and it's quite wonderful. And I think that when the children feel part of this community, then they want to stay. I'm hoping that it's just not because of the sweeties, but I also remember those sessions quite fondly. My last question to you, but you may have answered it already, is very much the benefits that you see for yourself today as a grown-up, once again, of being bilingual, and what it brings to you in your everyday life.
Sure. So I work in finance, so I never really expected that to be a kind of language-based job. It's a lot of number crunching, but actually half my team's French. They hired me because I spoke French. Well, not just because I spoke French, but that was one of the key things that I was able to bring to the table. I don't necessarily speak French every day on a daily basis, but I have done work in France with them. I've had to speak French to clients, in networking events. I do translation exercises. A lot of things that we're working on are based in French countries, and a lot of the content's in French, so I'm translating into English for the rest of the team. In my previous role, I worked in a sales job for a technology company, and again, I was speaking French to clients, reaching out to clients in France and pitching to them in French sometimes. I remember the first time I had to do that, and I wasn't expecting it. I thought it would be an English pitch, and then turned out they didn't really speak any English, and I just had to do a French pitch on the spot, and it was amazing because I would just would not have expected to be able to do that. I wouldn't say it was the best pitch in the world, but the possibility of being able to do that was just surreal, and I was really proud of myself. And like I said, I spent a year studying law in French, so French law in Paris. I've got a kind of certificate from that, so I've got a qualification. That, again, I would not have been able to do without the language skills that I have. I had to pass some quite rigorous tests to even be able to go. And when I was there, I just took the opportunity to get involved in everything that I could, and I made some great friends. I joined some teams. And again, it's just become such a normal part of my life. It's, I'm not spending my whole day speaking French every day. But I know that I could, if I wanted to, I could go and work in France. I could get to a point that, yeah, exactly. And I would never want to lose that. It's such a key part of my life. Again, I've said before, I picked up Spanish because I was able to pick up the language so much easier because I already knew French. So again, I just know that there's so many opportunities out there. If I want to, I can go to Spain, I can go to France. I could probably pick up Italian quite easily, and I've kind of started a bit. Yeah. It's just so many options. It really has transformed my life completely.
That's wonderful. And when you were just looking there and said that when you went to Paris, you did all the kind of practical things and worked and studied and opened a bank account and also joined some teams. And now I remember you were well into swimming, weren't you?
Yeah.
I remember that. And actually, it goes to show that you still were very regular to your French lessons. And I think that that's what parents also need to understand, is that you don't need to be there 3-4 times a week. I mean, we tend to offer our students several times or several slots a week to ensure that there is always one that they can attend. But we have students who just have one lesson a week and they do extremely well. You did a lot of competitive swimming and you could still do French. And that's why I mentioned the word lifestyle, because as long as it's part of these little linguists' life and that they've embraced it, it just has to be very regular, but it doesn't have to be intense. It doesn't have to be too much too soon. It's a journey. It's a journey that can clearly be quite wonderful, because I think yours is truly amazing. To see you starting when you were so young, to then go to school and come back to us when you just need help for exams, and now to see you go to Paris and all the rest of it is really quite wonderful. So it's definitely a journey that can lead people to quite wonderful things. So yeah. Zara, thank you ever so much. It was clearly a real pleasure for me to listen to you today and hear all the great stuff that you have to say about French, about being bilingual, about your journey towards bilingualism. And thank you very much for having been there all those years ago, because it's clearly thanks to young children like you if we're still here 20 years later. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I owe you more. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.